Welcome to This Is My Architecture. I'm Dave, and I'm joined here by Tim from CorpInfo. And CorpInfo is a premier AWS partner, but what do you guys do?
So we specialize in helping companies get their stuff out to the cloud, specifically on Amazon. And once they get it out there, we can also run it for them because we're also a managed service partner.
All right, so a double threat. That's awesome. And you came here to talk today about an IoT device that delivers video to the cloud. Like, what's going on here?
Yep, so we have a customer that has had some challenges in sort of figuring out how to actually get this IoT device to work in a scalable way. So for them, the big challenge was they started off as a small sort of company, and as they exploded, they ran into some sort of challenges in how they actually built things.
So the dangers of scale, right? You know, like the traps and pitfalls.
Yep.
But you guys solved that in kind of an interesting way.
Yep.
So why don't you show us what you did?
Sure. So when you think about it, you actually have a device that sits out in the wild. And its whole purpose is to be event-driven, and once an event occurs, it actually records that video. So the challenge is as you get more and more devices, how do you actually scale that? At what point or what interactions do you have that sort of define the scale points in that environment? So the most basic part of it is when we actually looked at it, for us, it was looking at what needs to be sort of on a global scale and what can be more segmented to make it a little easier for that device to function and give you scalability. And the way we sort of looked at it was the concept of dividing those up into what we call pods, right? So the first part of that is you on the global side, you have a service whose whole purpose is to sort of figure out where that device lives, or in the more basics, you have to do setup, you have to do user setup and control that information, as well as sort of keep the event stream, right?
Yep.
The second part of that is now once you actually have the device set up, it's when an event occurs, what do you do with it? So the second part being, now you actually have a setup that actually controls all of the events with regard to recording the video, and then once you actually have that video, doing something else.
Okay, so we got the out-of-the-box experience, right? Now we're taking an event, but where does it land?
Right. So once that event actually happens, and you actually get video that's coming in, the system is actually going to record the video on a service, and when it records that video, it actually stores it in S3.
Okay, great place to land data.
Right? So when you come into the LB, your EC2 instances are actually taking the action to actually do things with, and they're actually storing information about that event actually in an RDS database.
Okay, great, awesome.
So along with that, you need to understand how these events are showing. And one of the key things that sort of makes their problem unique is each user can have one device, but if somebody wants to use it, say you have one and I have one, and we both want to use it, now how do I get that information to your cell phone or to your computer?
Right.
That becomes a different problem, right? Because now I have one video stored out in S3, but I need to be able to give everyone access to it.
So how do we do that?
So part of that is actually building on that global service for having something that understands where those users live. So when you come in through the ELB, you then have, of course, your EC2 instances that sort of direct that information, and you store the event stream in DynamoDB. So what happens is when you actually hit that front end, you actually are pulling back a stream from DynamoDB of all of the events that are associated with you as a user. So even though you may be looking at somebody else's device, your event stream still contains all that information. And along with that event stream, we're going to direct you to the specific point to go get your video.
So like pointers in the database?
Correct.
Okay, great. And it's blazing fast because it's Dynamo, right?
Yep. That's the advantage we get. And we can sort of scale that event stream in a variety of different ways. So if you want to look at that information, let's say there are different event types that can sort of occur, and you can segment those and create specific tables for each of those event types. And maybe it becomes a little counterintuitive that it's not necessarily, you think about doing something like that on a referential database, like RDS, but for the speed standpoint and the fact that this data is read very rarely, it sounds strange, but you spend more time writing information than you do actually reading it.
So Dynamo is a great choice, even though it's like not inherently relational, right?
Correct. In this particular case, especially because of that fact, right? Is if I was going to spend more time reading the information, there might be some other ways we sort of architect it. But in terms of actually how we're allocating what we're doing in Dynamo, it's heavy on the write side and lower on the read side.
So we can dial up the writes
Correct.
and call it all good, right?
Correct.
Awesome.
Once all of this is done though, once you've actually collected the information, you have the event, you've recorded the video, and you've recorded maybe some interactions that the users had with that video. So maybe you've understood how often they viewed it or anything else. You then want to be able to report on that information.
Right.
So as a company, I need to be able to sort of collect that information and have a method by which I can actually see what occurs. So from that standpoint, you're then taking the information out of our RDS about the users and everything else. You're also taking the event streams and you're shoving them into Redshift. So now you can actually have reporting on it.
So events, user interactions, and we've got all this metadata, put it into Redshift, and magic happens.
Right.
Awesome.
That's the whole intent.
Well, this is a really great solution, and I really found it interesting how you were able to, go relational without being relational.
Yes.
So thanks for coming out, Tim.
Oh, no problem.
And thanks for watching This Is My Architecture.